Her sister is just a pathetic single mom, my sister's fiancé said into the microphone, and my mother, sitting 3 seats away, laughed so hard her champagne nearly spilled. 200 guests followed her lead. The crystal chandeliers caught every grinning face, every tilted glass, every person who thought my life was the punchline to someone else's wedding toast. I sat at table 12, the table they stick you at when they wish you hadn't shown up, and I didn't move. My hands stayed flat on the linen. My breath stayed even. But under the table, my 12-year-old son's fist was clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. What none of them knew, not my mother, not Derek, not a single person in that ballroom, was that my son had been carrying a secret for 3 weeks, and he was about to share it with every last one of them. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with this story. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I always love knowing where you're listening from. I'm Fiona, I'm 34, and this is the story of my sister's wedding, the one that never actually happened. Now let me take you back 6 months, to the phone call that started everything. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was halfway through a logo redesign for a brewery client in New Haven when Brooke's name lit up my phone. I almost let it ring. My sister and I talked maybe once a month. Short, polite conversations that never said anything real. "I'm engaged!" she screamed before I could finish saying hello. I said congratulations. I meant it. Whatever had gone sideways between us over the years, I still wanted her to be happy. His name is Derek Mercer. He's in real estate development. Mom already loves him. She paused. Mom says you have to come to the engagement dinner. No excuses this time. Not, I want you there. Not, it would mean a lot. Mom says you have to come. That was the Henderson family in 4 words. My mother, Judith Henderson, had spent 30 years perfecting the art of comparison. Brooke was the daughter who got the looks, the event coordinator job at a luxury hotel chain, the Greenwich Social Circle. I was the daughter who got divorced at 26, moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Hartford, and built a freelance graphic design business from a second-hand desk. My walls were covered in work I'd designed for clients across Connecticut, clean, precise, award-adjacent. Judith had never once asked to see any of it. That night, after Ethan went to bed, I scrolled the family group chat. Brooke had sent a photo of the ring, Tiffany setting, at least 2.5 carats. The kind of ring that makes a statement before the woman wearing it says a word. My mother's reply sat at the bottom of the thread. Finally, one of my daughters did something right. I read it twice. Then I closed the app and went back to my brewery logo. Some messages don't need a response. They just need to be remembered. I met Derek Mercer for the first time at my mother's house in Greenwich, a colonial revival she'd bought with the divorce settlement, the kind of place with a marble foyer and fresh peonies on every surface, a diptyque candle burning in the living room as if the house itself needed a signature scent. Derek arrived 10 minutes after we did. Brunello Cucinelli sport coat, slim-cut trousers, Oxford shoes polished to a mirror finish. He shook my hand firmly and held eye contact just long enough to feel rehearsed. But what I noticed first was something else. The way he scanned the room before he greeted anyone. The art on the walls, the furniture, the square footage. He went straight for my mother. "Mrs. Henderson, this house has more character than half the listings I've sold this year." He gestured toward a watercolor above the fireplace. "Is that a Martin Johnson head? The light is extraordinary." Judith practically glowed. She touched his arm and launched into the story of acquiring it at a Sotheby's estate sale. I watched Derek nod in all the right places, ask the right follow-up questions, mirror her posture like a man who'd studied the playbook. When he finally turned to me, the warmth cooled by exactly 1 degree. "Fiona, great to finally meet you." He shook my hand but didn't hold it. When Ethan stepped forward and said, "Nice to meet you, sir," Derek gave him a quick nod, no handshake, no eye contact, and turned back to Brooke. Brooke was radiant, genuinely, unmistakably happy. She held Derek's arm like he was the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life. During dinner, I saw Derek check his phone under the table. The screen lit up with a name, V, and a heart emoji. He swiped it away in half a second. I told myself it was nothing. On the drive home, Ethan was quiet for the first 10 minutes. That was unusual. My son was the kind of 12-year-old who had opinions about everything: algorithms, graphic novels, the structural integrity of bridges. Silence from Ethan meant something was processing. "Mom," he said finally, staring out the passenger window at the I-95 headlights. "Why doesn't Grandma ever ask about your work?" I kept my eyes on the road. "She has a lot going on, buddy." "She asked Derek about his job 3 times. She didn't ask you once." I didn't have an answer that would make sense to him. The truth, that my mother had never forgiven me for my divorce, wasn't something I wanted to hand a 12-year-old. Tyler and I split when Ethan was 4. Tyler had been sleeping with a colleague for 6 months. I found out through a credit card statement. A hotel in Mystic on a weekend he'd told me he was at a conference. Clean, simple, verifiable betrayal. I filed. He signed. He moved to Oregon and called Ethan once a month, then once a quarter, then not at all. Judith's response: "You pushed him away, Fiona. Men like Tyler don't just leave." I stopped trying to earn my mother's approval the year I turned 30. Some debts aren't worth collecting, but I'd rebuilt. I had a client list that paid the bills. Ethan was healthy, curious, pulling straight A's. Our apartment was small, but it was ours. Every lamp chosen, every picture hung, every square foot earned. I drove a 2019 Honda Civic, paid off in full. Nothing fancy. Nothing owed to anyone. "I don't trust him, Mom," Ethan said as we pulled into our parking lot. "Derek, he smiles too much." I almost laughed. "That's not a crime, Ethan." "No," he said, "but it's a tell." 4 months before the wedding, Brooke called to offer me a role. "I want you to be a bridesmaid," she said, and for a moment I felt something warm crack open in my chest. It lasted 12 hours. The next morning, Judith called. "I've spoken with Brooke. We've decided the bridal party needs a certain cohesion. You'll do a reading during the ceremony instead. A poem, something tasteful." "A reading?" "It's an important role, Fiona. Don't make this difficult." Cohesion. That was the word she used. What she meant was, the bridesmaids would be photographed, and I didn't fit the frame. So I was off the bridal party. No dress fitting, no bridal shower invite, just a poem and a seat at whatever table they stuck me at. I didn't argue. I'd spent enough years learning that arguing with Judith was like arguing with weather, exhausting and pointless. What did catch my attention was the venue. Derek had selected the Lockwood Estate, a boutique property outside Litchfield. Rolling lawns, stone terraces, a ballroom that could hold 250. The deposit alone was $85,000, and Derek had insisted on signing the contract himself. "Let me handle this," he told Brooke. "A man takes care of these things." Judith loved that. She was writing the checks, over $200,000 from her personal account, but Derek's name was on the venue agreement. Nobody questioned it. One evening, I overheard Brooke on the phone. "Derek says a prenup would ruin the trust between us. He says if I really love him, I wouldn't need a safety net." I stood in the hallway of my mother's house and felt every alarm in my body fire at once. The man who insisted on handling the money was the same man refusing to let anyone look at his. I tried once, one conversation, that's all I asked for. I caught Brooke alone at a cafe in Stamford. Neutral ground, no Judith, no Derek. I kept it simple. "Have you looked into Derek's finances? A prenup isn't a lack of trust. It protects both of you." Brooke's face went rigid before I finished the sentence. "You're jealous." She said it like she'd been waiting to say it. "You couldn't keep a husband, so you don't want me to have one." "Brooke, that's not—" "Save it, Fiona. I know exactly what this is." She left her latte untouched on the table and walked out. I sat there for 10 minutes, staring at the foam dissolving into nothing. That night, Judith called. Her voice had the surgical calm she used when she wanted to cut without leaving a mark. "Brooke told me what you said. If you sabotage this wedding, Fiona, you are not welcome in this family anymore. No Thanksgiving, No Christmas. Nothing. She paused. Do you understand me? Mom, I think there are things about Derek that Brooke needs to. I don't want to hear it. This is the best thing that has ever happened to your sister, and I will not let you ruin it because you're bitter about your own choices. She hung up. I sat in my apartment, my small, clean, paid-for apartment, and looked at the two monitors on my desk glowing with client work, the walls covered in designs I was proud of, the quiet proof of a life I'd built from the wreckage of one that fell apart. Then I picked up my phone and called Rachel Whitmore. Rach, I said, if I wanted to look into someone's background, hypothetically, how would I do that? Rachel didn't miss a beat. Hypothetically? You'd call your best friend who happens to be a family attorney, which you just did. 2 months before the wedding, family brunch at the Meadow Ridge Country Club, the kind of place where the tablecloths are starched so stiff they could stand on their own and the mimosas cost $18 a glass. Derek was in peak form that morning. He'd just finished a story about closing a deal in Westport when he turned to me with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. So, Fiona, still doing the little art thing from home? That must be... He tilted his head. Cozy. Before I could respond, Judith laughed. A quick practice sound. Derek, don't be mean. She's doing her best. Not everyone's cut out for the real world. Brooke looked down at her phone. She always looked down at her phone. Derek wasn't finished. He turned to Ethan, who was quietly eating his French toast, and dropped his voice to the exaggerated warmth adults use with toddlers. And this must be the man of the house, huh? Ethan set down his fork. I'm 12, sir. Flat voice, direct eye contact. Derek blinked, just once, then laughed it off and went back to his Westport story. 15 minutes later, Derek excused himself to the restroom and left his phone face up on the table. It buzzed once, then again. The lock screen notification was visible to anyone sitting within 3 feet. V, miss you. When are you coming to the city? I was across the table. I didn't see it. Ethan did. He was right there, 1 seat away, and he read every word on that screen before it dimmed. He didn't say anything. He picked up his fork, went back to his French toast, and filed it away in that quiet, calculating mind of his. I wouldn't find out about this for another 2 weeks. The bridal shower happened on a Saturday in March. I found out about it the way you find out about weather. It was already happening by the time I noticed. Brooke's Instagram story, 30 women at a spa in Greenwich, champagne tower catching the afternoon light, matching robes, someone holding a sign that read, Future Mrs. Mercer. My mother was front and center in every frame, arm around Brooke, beaming like a woman who'd finally gotten the daughter she ordered. The caption, My beautiful daughter and her tribe, so proud. Daughter, singular. I wasn't angry. I was past angry. Angry was 3 exits back on a highway I'd been driving my whole life. What I felt was a cold, clean clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop expecting anything from people who were never going to give it. Then the email arrived. A charge notification, $3,200 to a Greenwich Day spa, posted to a credit card with my name on it. An old authorized user card from college that I'd forgotten to remove. Judith had put the entire bridal shower on it. I called her. Mom, there's a $3,200 charge on my card. Consider it your contribution, since you couldn't be bothered to attend. I wasn't invited. A pause, then. Don't start, Fiona. I hung up. I called the bank, removed myself as an authorized user, and filed a dispute on the charge. It was resolved in 11 days, but the cost of the call wasn't financial. That night, I sat at my desk with client work open on both screens and called Rachel. Something is very wrong with this family dynamic, I told her. And Rach, I think something is wrong with Derek too. The background check is already running, she said. Give me a week. The tuxedo fitting was Brooke's idea. She wanted Ethan to be a junior usher, one of the few generous gestures that actually felt like it came from her, not Judith. So I drove Ethan to the tailor in Darien on a Thursday afternoon, his school backpack still slung over one shoulder. Derek arrived 20 minutes late with 3 groomsmen and the kind of energy that fills a room by pushing everyone else to the edges. He saw Ethan standing on the fitting platform in a junior vest and turned to his best man, Todd, with a grin. He said it just loud enough. Not a whisper, a stage comment, the kind designed to be overheard. Brooke insisted on including him. You know, the fatherless kid needs a male role model somewhere. Todd laughed. The other groomsmen gave tight, uncertain smiles. The tailor kept his eyes on his measuring tape. Ethan didn't move. His reflection in the 3-panel mirror stared back at him, a 12-year-old boy in a half-fitted vest, face flushing red from the collar up. I'd been in the waiting area. I walked in just in time to see my son's expression, that locked jaw stillness that meant he was holding something down with both hands. His name is Ethan, I said. My voice was level, but my hands were shaking inside my coat pockets. And he has everything he needs. Derek raised both palms. Relax, Fiona. Just guy talk. I held his gaze for 3 seconds. He looked away first. On the drive home, Ethan was silent until we hit the Merritt Parkway. Then quietly, Mom, I saw something on Derek's phone at brunch. Messages from someone named V. He paused. They weren't normal messages. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I'll tell you everything when we get home. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Ethan did his homework every night, where I spread out design proofs, where we ate takeout Thai on Fridays. That ordinary table became the place where everything shifted. At brunch, Ethan said, when Derek went to the bathroom, his phone kept buzzing. The messages were right there on the lock screen, from someone named V. What did they say? He pulled out his own phone and opened the Notes app. He typed everything from memory that same night, word for word, the way a kid who codes in Python remembers syntax. V said, "Can't wait for this circus to be over." Derek replied, 3 years max, then I'm set. And V said, "Just get through the wedding, babe." I sat there. The kitchen faucet dripped. The refrigerator hummed. I didn't want to cause trouble, Mom. His voice was small. But after what he said about me today at the fitting, Ethan. I reached across the table and held his hand. You did the right thing telling me. He nodded. I could see the relief loosen his shoulders, the weight of carrying someone else's secret for 2 weeks finally lifting. I spent that night lying awake, turning the same question over and over. If I brought this to Brooke, she'd call me jealous. If I brought it to Judith, she'd call me a saboteur. If I stayed silent, my sister would marry a man who'd referred to their wedding as a circus and given it an expiration date. The next morning, I called Rachel. I need you to run that background check now. Full public records. Credit report if you can get it through a legitimate data broker. Everything legal, everything documented. Give me a week, she said. And Fiona, if what your son saw is real, this isn't just about your sister anymore. The rehearsal dinner was held in a private dining room at Maison Laurent, a French restaurant in Greenwich, where the tasting menu ran $180 a person and the wine list was thicker than most novels. 40 guests, all inner circle. Crystal stemware, candlelight, the low murmur of people who knew how to perform wealth at a dinner table. Derek stood to toast. He held his glass of Burgundy like a prop in a one-man show. To family, he said, letting the words settle. The ones who show up. His eyes found mine across the table. To, well, try their best. Polite laughter. Judith raised her glass. Brooke squeezed Derek's arm. I kept my expression neutral. Ethan, seated beside me, cut his fillet without looking up. Midway through dessert, Derek stepped outside with 3 groomsmen for cigars. He left his phone on the white tablecloth, face down, right next to his water glass. It started buzzing almost immediately, 3 times in a row. The vibration was loud enough to turn heads. Ethan glanced at me. I was talking to an aunt I barely knew. Nobody was watching him. He reached across, tilted the phone just enough to see the lock screen. Notification after notification from V. Full preview text visible. Can't wait for this circus to be over. You know I'm the one you come home to. 3 years max, right? Ethan slid his own phone from his jacket pocket. 4 photos. Clean, sharp, time-stamped. The contact name, the preview text, the time, all captured in the glow of the restaurant's candlelight. Then he set Derek's phone back exactly where it had been. Same angle, same position. Derek returned 5 minutes later smelling like cigar smoke and self-satisfaction. He picked up his phone without a second glance. My 12-year-old was the only person at that table paying attention to the truth. The morning after the rehearsal dinner, my mother summoned me to Greenwich. She was waiting in the living room, espresso in a Hermes cup, Cartier love bracelet catching the light from the bay window, posture so straight it looked architectural. Everything about Judith Henderson was curated, even the way she delivered threats. "I know you have opinions about Derek," she said before I'd taken off my coat. "You will keep them to yourself tomorrow. This is Brooke's day." "Mom, I think there are things about Derek that Brooke needs to know before she—" "Like what?" Judith set down the cup. "That he's too good for this family? That a man with his career and his charm chose your sister? If anything, Fiona, that should give you hope." "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds exactly like what you always do. Find a way to make Brooke's happiness about your unhappiness." She stood up and smoothed her silk blouse. "Let me be clear. If you cause any drama at that wedding, you are out. No Thanksgiving, no Christmas, no calls. I will not have you embarrass this family again." Again, as if my entire existence had been one long embarrassment. I left without responding. There was nothing to say to a woman who'd already written the verdict before hearing the case. In the car, I sat with the engine off for a full minute. Then my phone chimed. An email from Rachel Whitmore. Subject line, "Background results, Derek Mercer." The body of the email was 3 words. "Call me, now." I called. And what Rachel told me over the next 12 minutes changed everything. But that conversation deserves its own chapter. Rachel didn't soften it. She never did. It was the thing I loved most about her. "Derek Mercer currently carries $187,000 in personal debt," she said. "Student loans, 3 maxed credit cards, and a personal loan from a private lender at 19% interest." I pulled the car to the side of the road. His employment at Whitfield and Partners ended 4 months ago. He was terminated, not laid off, terminated, for what their HR filing describes as material misrepresentation of client investment accounts. He told Brooke he's a senior partner there. "There's no senior partner named Derek Mercer. There hasn't been for 4 months. And that company he keeps talking about, Mercer Property Group? I ran it. It's a registered LLC with 0 employees, 0 revenue, and a mailing address that traces to a UPS store in Stamford." I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. "He's not marrying your sister for love, Fiona." Rachel's voice was steady, clinical, the way it got when she was building a case. "He's marrying her for a balance sheet. If I show this to Brooke, she won't believe me. Judith will say I fabricated it." "You won't have to fabricate anything. This is all public record. Employment verification, LLC filings, credit report through a licensed consumer data broker. My bar number's on every page. Anyone can verify it." "Then I need it printed. Everything. Tonight." "Already done. I'll drop it off within the hour." I sat in my car on the shoulder of the post road and watched the traffic pass. I had the proof. Screenshots from Ethan. A background report from a licensed attorney. 2 separate sources, 2 separate moments, pointing at the same man. What I didn't have was a family willing to listen. The morning of the wedding, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and made a decision. I put on a navy blue wrap dress, no label, just a clean cut that fit well, and pinned my hair back with a simple clip. Ethan wore his dark suit from the fitting, the one Derek's comment had stained. He stood at the hallway mirror, tying his own necktie, tongue between his teeth in concentration, and something in my chest tightened. "Ready?" I asked. "Ready." I slipped a manila folder into my clutch. Rachel's report, 12 pages, letterhead, bar number, date stamped. I told myself, only if absolutely necessary, only if there's no other way. Ethan patted his jacket pocket. "I have the screenshots, Mom, just in case." "We're not here to cause a scene, Ethan. We're here for your aunt." He looked at me, calm, serious, older than 12. "I know, but someone should be here for the truth, too." The Lockwood estate was everything Judith had wanted. Stone terraces wrapped in climbing roses, a string quartet playing pachelbel in the garden, 200 chairs draped in ivory silk, facing a flower-covered arch, crystal everywhere, catching light, throwing it back, making the whole place shimmer like something out of a catalog. I saw Derek by the main entrance, greeting guests with the practiced ease of a man who'd rehearsed every handshake. He spotted me and gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Glad you could make it, Fiona. Love the understated look." I walked past him without responding. Inside the ballroom, I found our place cards. Table 12. Back corner, near the service entrance. The table they seat you at when your name is on the list, but your presence is optional. Ethan picked up his card and read the number. "Table 12, he said. "That's the table for people they wish didn't come." So here I am, table 12, clutch bag with a background check inside, my 12-year-old son sitting next to me with screenshots on his phone, and neither of us planned to use any of it. I came to that wedding fully prepared to stay silent and let Brooke have her day. But then Derek opened his mouth. "What would you have done? If you had the proof but your own family refused to listen, would you have spoken up or stayed quiet? Type A if you would have stayed silent. Type B if you would have spoken. I'll tell you what happened next. And honestly, I didn't get to choose. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll give it that." Brooke walked down the aisle in a cathedral-length veil, arm linked through Judith's since our father wasn't there to do the honors. His choice, Arizona, a new wife, a clean conscience. Judith wore champagne silk and a smile so wide it could have sold diamonds. The string quartet shifted into Debussy, 200 people stood, phones rose like a field of glass flowers. And Brooke, my little sister, the golden child, the favorite, looked genuinely, heartbreakingly beautiful, genuinely happy. I watched her face and thought, what if I'm wrong? What if Derek really does love her? The officiant opened his book. "Dearly beloved." Derek delivered his vows without a single stumble. Eye contact, measured pauses, a crack in his voice at exactly the right moment. It was a flawless performance. The woman 2 rows ahead of me dabbed her eyes. Judith pressed a monogrammed handkerchief to her cheek. Brooke's vows were different. Her voice shook. Her hands trembled. She forgot a line, laughed at herself, and started over. It was real, painfully, unmistakably real. "I do," she said. "I do," he said. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." My clutch sat on my lap, the folder inside it untouched. Ethan's hand rested on his jacket pocket, still. I'd missed the window. The ceremony was done. They were married, at least in the eyes of 200 guests who were already on their feet, clapping, crying, tossing rose petals. But here's the thing about a wedding in Connecticut. The ceremony is theater. The legal part, the marriage certificate, the officiant's signature, the county filing, that happens after. Usually in a back room, quietly, before the reception ends. Reverend Collins hadn't signed anything yet. The paperwork was still sitting on a small table in the filing room. They were married in the eyes of the crowd, but not in the eyes of the law. The ballroom at the Lockwood estate had been transformed into something out of a magazine spread. 12-tier cake with cascading sugar flowers, monogrammed napkins reading B&D in gold foil, a custom cocktail menu printed on linen cardstock. 200 guests settled into their chairs with the pleasant hum of people who believed they'd just witnessed love. Toast time. Since our father wasn't present, Judith took the podium first. She gripped the microphone with both hands and delivered a speech that was equal parts performance and eulogy for the daughter she preferred. I always knew one of my daughters would find someone worthy. She let the emphasis land like a dropped glass. A few guests glanced my way. I kept my eyes on the centerpiece. Then it was Derek's turn. He took the microphone with the ease of a man who'd spoken at 100 client dinners, 100 pitch meetings, 100 rooms full of people he needed to believe him. I want to thank everyone who's here today, he said, even those who, well, let's just say not everyone in this family believed in us. He looked directly at me. The room followed his gaze. Todd, his best man, leaned into a side mic. Yeah, we almost had to assign a +1 for Fiona, but she brought her kid instead. Laughter, loud, rolling, the kind that bounces off crystal and marble. Derek wrote it. Come on, Todd, be nice. Fiona is... she's doing her best. He paused, timing it like a comedian. She's just a pathetic single mom trying to figure it out. The ballroom erupted, 200 people, laughing, at me. I felt the heat rise from my collarbone to my temples. My fingers pressed flat against the tablecloth. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And then I felt Ethan's chair slide back. The laughter hadn't fully settled when my mother stood up. She was still holding her champagne, the same glass from her toast, barely touched, more prop than drink. She had that smile, the one she wore when she was about to say something devastating and call it affection. Oh, Derek, don't be too hard on her. Judith's voice carried across the ballroom with the precision of a woman who'd spent 61 years learning how to command a room. She's like a discount model with a scratched label, still on the shelf but nobody's buying. 200 people laughed. Some of them tried not to. Most didn't bother. I sat perfectly still, my hands flat on the table, my eyes straight ahead. The chandelier light fractured into 1,000 tiny knives across the ceiling, and every single one of them was aimed at table 12. This was the moment my mother had been building toward my entire life. The public confirmation that I was the lesser daughter, delivered to an audience large enough to make it permanent. But she miscalculated one thing. She forgot about the boy sitting next to me. Ethan's napkin hit the table. His chair scraped against the hardwood. He was on his feet before I could process what was happening. Ethan, I grabbed his wrist. Sit down. He looked at me. 12 years old, dark suit from Macy's, a jaw set like concrete. No, Mom. He pulled free, and he walked. Across the ballroom, past table 11, table 10, table 6, past the 12-tier cake and the monogrammed napkins, and the 200 people who had just laughed at his mother. He walked all the way to the front of the room, stepped onto the small platform, and took the microphone from its stand. The room noticed. Conversations stalled. Forks paused mid-air. Ethan tapped the mic once. The sound popped through the speakers. I know something about the groom. The ballroom went silent. Every set of eyes in that room locked onto my son. He stood at the podium, shoulders square, chin up, the overhead light catching the lapels of his off-the-rack suit. He looked impossibly small against the backdrop of the flower arch and the 12-tier cake, but his voice didn't waver. 3 weeks ago, at the rehearsal dinner, Ethan said, I saw messages on your phone, Derek. Derek was still standing near the head table, champagne glass frozen in his hand. His smile remained, but something behind it shifted. A flicker, like a bulb about to burn out. Kid, sit down. Derek let out a short laugh. This isn't a game. Ethan didn't sit. Messages from someone named Victoria. She called the wedding a circus. You told her 3 years max. The murmur started at the back of the room and rippled forward like wind across water. Heads turned, glasses lowered. 200 people recalculated the man in the Brunello Cucinelli suit. Judith shot to her feet. Fiona, control your child! I was already standing. I'd gotten up the moment Ethan reached the platform, not to pull him back, but to be close if he needed me. I stood 10 feet behind him, and I did not call him back. Derek shifted his weight. He's a kid. He's making things up. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket and held up his phone. The screen glowed blue-white in the ballroom light. I have the screenshots. On my phone. Right now. Dead silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses against your eardrums, that makes 200 people forget to breathe at the same time. Derek's smile finally dropped. Completely. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something real cross his face. Fear. I walked to the platform. No rush, no drama. Just a mother standing next to her son. I didn't take the microphone from Ethan. I stood beside him and spoke into it together, my hand resting on his shoulder. Steady, grounding, the only physical contact I needed to make. My son is telling the truth, I said, and I have documentation to support it. I opened my clutch, pulled out the manila folder, and held it up so the front tables could see Rachel Whitmore's letterhead. Clean, professional, undeniable. Derek Mercer was terminated from Whitfield and Partners 4 months ago for misrepresentation of client funds. His company, Mercer Property Group, is a registered shell. 0 revenue, 0 employees, and a mailing address at a UPS store in Stamford. I paused. He is currently carrying $187,000 in personal debt. Gasps. Not whispers. Gasps. The kind that puncture the atmosphere of a room like a needle through silk. Derek's face lost 2 shades of color. This is insane. Brooke, tell them this is... Brooke stood from the head table. Her veil was still pinned in her hair. Her bouquet lay on the tablecloth where she'd set it during dinner. Her face was the color of the linen. Derek. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Is this true? She's lying, Derek pointed at me. She's jealous. She's always been jealous of you. She fabricated. The report was pulled from public records by a licensed attorney. I opened the folder to the last page and held it up. Her name is Rachel Whitmore. Her bar number is on every page. You're welcome to verify. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The paperwork was loud enough. Brooke stepped around the table and reached for the folder. Brooke held the first page with both hands. Her fingers left small creases in the paper. She read. And as she read, her face changed, not all at once, but in layers, like watching ice crack from the inside out. You told me Mercer Property Group had 12 employees. She looked up at Derek. Brooke, if you just let me. You told me you closed a $4 million deal last month. There's context to all of this. You told me a prenup was an insult to our love. Her voice broke on the last word. Not from sadness. From the sound of something she'd believed shattering against something that was true. The murmurs were spreading now. Guests at the near tables had heard every word. Those farther back were craning, whispering, passing fragments of information down the rows, like a current running through water. Ethan held up his phone. The nearest table, Judith's friends, donors, country club women in Chanel, leaned in. His screen showed the screenshots clearly. V. At the top, timestamps, message previews. Can't wait for this circus to be over. 3 years max, right? The phone moved from hand to hand. I watched a woman named Margaret, one of Judith's oldest friends, hold the screen at arm's length, read it, and press her hand over her mouth. Oh my God, she said, loud enough for 3 tables to hear. The messages are real. Todd, Derek's best man, took a step backward, then another. He physically distanced himself from the man he'd stood beside at the altar 30 minutes earlier. Derek grabbed Brooke's arm. We need to talk about this privately. Brooke pulled free with a force that made the nearest guests flinch. Don't touch me. Her voice was steel-wrapped in grief. Don't you dare touch me. What happened next was textbook. And I mean that literally. Rachel had once described it to me over coffee. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Derek ran the playbook in real time. He spun toward the crowd, arms wide, voice pitched to carry. Are you really going to let a bitter divorcee and her kid ruin this beautiful day? He pointed at me. She has been trying to sabotage this wedding from day one. Ask Judith, she'll tell you. Judith opened her mouth. For 34 years, my mother had never once failed to take his side of any argument if it meant keeping me in my designated lane. But Brooke got there first. Mom, stop. 2 words. And Judith closed her mouth. Derek pivoted to Ethan. You went through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy. You had no right. A voice from the fourth table cut through the ballroom. A man in his 60s, silver hair, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. Brooke's uncle, Martin, an attorney by trade. The content of those messages is more relevant than how they were obtained, young man. Martin's voice had the calm authority of someone who'd spent 40 years in courtrooms. I'd sit down if I were you, Derek. Derek didn't sit. The mask didn't just slip. It shattered. His jaw tightened. His posture shifted from charm to something cornered and feral. He turned on me. You have no idea what you've done. I will sue you for defamation. I will... For what? I said. Public records? He stared at me. I stared back. And I realized something I should have known the first time he scanned my mother's living room like an appraiser. Derek Mercer had never once been challenged by someone who wasn't afraid of him. He didn't know what to do with it. I need to pause here for a moment. Because what happened next changed my relationship with my sister, my mother, and my son. Permanently. Before I finish this story, I want to ask you something real. If your own family had spent years telling you that you were less than, and then one moment proved them all wrong, would you forgive them? Type 1 if you'd forgive. Type 2 if you'd walk away. Type 3 if it depends. There's no wrong answer. But my answer might surprise you. Brooke walked to the microphone. Not the confident walk she'd used coming down the aisle. This was slower, heavier, the walk of a woman carrying the weight of what she'd just learned and the wreckage of what she'd just lost. 200 people watched her in complete silence. She gripped the mic stand with one hand and spoke clearly. The marriage certificate hasn't been signed yet. She turned to the officiant, Reverend Collins, who'd been standing near the service corridor with an expression caught between professional composure and personal horror. Reverend Collins, please do not file that paperwork. He nodded once. Brooke turned to Derek. Whatever was left of the fairy tale, the Tiffany ring, the Lockwood estate, the 200 guests, and the 12-tier cake, she let it go in 6 words. We're done, Derek. Brooke, you're being emotional. His voice had the strained calm of a man watching his exit strategy collapse in real time. Let's go somewhere and talk. I said we're done. She took a breath. And the venue contract is in your name, Derek. You insisted on that. The $85,000 deposit? That's your problem now. I watched the realization cross his face. It started at his eyes, a widening, a recalculation, and traveled down to his hands, which he clenched at his sides. He'd signed the venue agreement. He'd insisted on it. Let me handle this. A man takes care of these things. Those were his exact words, quoted back to me by Brooke 3 months ago. The Lockwood Estates contract was non-refundable. $85,000, tied to the legal name Derek T. Mercer. Judith's money had paid for it, but Derek's signature had claimed it, and now it was his anchor. Derek looked for an ally. His eyes swept the room the same way they'd swept my mother's living room the first time, calculating, measuring, looking for leverage. Todd was gone. He'd slipped out through the garden terrace sometime during Ethan's speech. The other groomsmen were studying their shoes, their napkins, the tablecloth, anything that wasn't Derek. He turned to Judith. My mother stood by the head table, champagne glass still in her hand, perfectly motionless. For the first time in my life, I watched Judith Henderson have absolutely nothing to say. Derek waited. Judith said nothing. You're all going to regret this, he said. His voice was thin now, stripped of its Brunello Cucinelli polish. He pointed at me, then at Ethan, then at the room. No one responded. 200 people, not a word. He turned and walked toward the exit. The sound was the loudest thing in the room. Dress shoes on hardwood, each step echoing through a ballroom designed for music and toasts and applause. He didn't look back. The double doors opened. A rectangle of evening light fell across the floor. Then the doors closed, and he was gone. No one followed him. Not his groomsmen, not his guests, not the woman who'd walked down the aisle toward him less than an hour ago. 200 people watched Derek Mercer leave, and not a single one of them moved. I stood with my hand still on Ethan's shoulder. The folder was on the podium, open, pages visible. From across the room, Brooke was looking at me. Not at the door Derek had walked through, not at the unsigned certificate on Reverend Collins's table. At me. And in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen directed at me in a very long time. She saw me. The ballroom hovered in that uncertain space between event and aftermath. Guests murmured to each other, unsure whether to stay or go. Waitstaff stood frozen near the kitchen doors, trays of champagne untouched. Judith hadn't moved. She still stood by the head table, her champagne glass clutched like a talisman. When she finally spoke, it was aimed at me. "Are you happy now?" Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "You ruined your sister's wedding." I met her eyes. "Mom, I didn't ruin anything. Derek did. If you hadn't made a spectacle of yourself..." "Fiona didn't make a spectacle." Brooke's voice came from behind Judith, sharp enough to cut glass. "She saved me. Do you understand that?" Judith turned to face her younger daughter. I watched her search for the script, the prepared response, the practiced deflection she always had ready. For the first time, the teleprompter was blank. "And the things you said about her tonight," Brooke continued, "discount model with a scratched label. You said that, in front of 200 people, about your own daughter." Judith's lips parted. Nothing came out. "That's who you are, Mom." Brooke's voice cracked, but she held it together. "That's not who Fiona is." Something in Judith's face shifted. Not contrition, not yet. It was closer to the expression of a woman who'd spent decades building a stage and just watched it collapse beneath her feet. Her hand trembled. She set the champagne glass down on the table. The first time all night her hands had been empty. Margaret, her oldest friend, gently took her arm. "Judith, let's sit down." Judith let herself be led to a chair. She sat. She didn't speak again for the rest of the evening, and Brooke, my little sister, the one who'd always looked down at her phone when the cruelty flew, walked toward me. The guests had begun drifting toward the exits or clustering at the bar, giving the family space the way people do when they've witnessed something too private for a public room. The string quartet had stopped playing. The cake stood untouched, its sugar flowers catching the last of the evening light. Brooke stopped in front of me and didn't say a word. She just reached forward and held on. It was the first real hug between us in years. Not the performative kind, the sideways, one-arm, air kiss variety we'd perfected at Judith's holiday tables. This was full, tight, her face pressed into my shoulder, her veil snagging on my earring. She was shaking. "I should have listened to you," she said into my collarbone. 3 months ago you tried to tell me. You weren't ready to hear it then. That's okay." "It's not okay." She pulled back. Mascara streaked her cheeks. "The bridal shower. The bridesmaid thing. Sitting there while Mom said those things to you. While Derek..." Her voice broke. "I never stopped him. I never stopped any of them." "We'll figure it out," I said. "Not today, but we will." She looked past me and saw Ethan standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, clearly unsure whether to intrude. Brooke stepped toward him, and I watched my 29-year-old sister kneel on the ballroom floor in her cathedral-length wedding dress and look my son in the eye. "Thank you, Ethan." Her voice steadied. "You are the bravest person in this room." Ethan shifted his weight. "I just told the truth, Aunt Brooke." She reached up and straightened his tie, the one he'd knotted himself that morning, and something in the gesture undid me. Then Brooke stood, unclasped the Tiffany ring from her finger, and set it on the table. He can have it back. It probably isn't paid for either. 2 days after the wedding, Rachel called with the full picture. The marriage certificate was never signed, she said. Reverend Collins confirmed it in writing. As far as the state of Connecticut is concerned, no marriage took place. Brooke won't need an annulment. There's nothing to annul. I let that settle. Nothing to annul. 6 months of planning, $200,000, 200 guests, and legally, it was as if the day had never happened. Now for the venue, Rachel continued. I spoke with the Lockwood Estates event manager this morning. The contract is in Derek Mercer's name. His signature, his liability. The $85,000 deposit is non-refundable per the cancellation clause. Brooke and your mother have zero financial obligation. He insisted on signing it himself, and that decision just became the most expensive autograph of his life. The math was brutal. The venue deposit, $85,000, wedding-related charges he'd put on his own credit cards, the rehearsal dinner, the groomsmen's tuxedos, the custom cocktail menu, another $30,000, roughly. Add that to his existing debt of $187,000, and Derek Mercer was staring down a hole just north of $300,000. He'll likely need to file for bankruptcy within the year, Rachel said matter-of-factly. There was one more piece, the social media fallout. Several guests had posted from the reception, discreet clips, shocked reactions, second-hand accounts. Within 48 hours, Derek's former employer, Whitfield and Partners, issued a brief public statement confirming that he'd been terminated for material misrepresentation and had not been affiliated with the firm for 4 months. And Victoria Lane, the woman behind the V messages, had blocked Derek on every platform. Mutual friends confirmed it. He'd gambled on the Henderson name. He lost the Henderson money, his reputation, and the woman he'd kept on the side. Judith called a week later. I almost didn't answer. Her voice was different. Not the voice that commanded dinner tables and delivered ultimatums in the living room. Smaller, stripped of the lacquer she usually applied before speaking. Margaret said I should call. A long pause. She said I owe you an apology. I didn't respond. I let the silence do what silence does, force the other person to fill it with something honest. The things I said at the wedding, Judith continued, and before the wedding, and... She stopped, started again. For years, Fiona, the things I've said for years. Okay. I was afraid. The words came out cracked, like she'd been rehearsing them and still couldn't get them smooth. After your father left, I was terrified that my daughters would end up like me, alone. And when you got divorced, I saw myself in you, and I hated it. There it was. Not the apology itself, but the architecture behind the cruelty. Judith hadn't been punishing me for being a single mother. She'd been punishing me for reminding her that she was one too. So you punished me for your fear, I said. Yes. Another pause, longer this time. That's a start, Mom, but it's going to take more than a phone call. I know. You spent 30 years making me feel like the wrong daughter. You said it in front of 200 people. You turned it into entertainment. I know. So I'm not going to tell you it's fine, because it isn't. I understand. We sat in silence for a while. Not a comfortable silence, more like two people standing on opposite sides of a river, aware of the distance for the first time. I'd like to try, Judith said. Then try, I said. But I'm not meeting you halfway. You have further to walk. 1 month later, Brooke was already a different person. Not a complete transformation. Those are fairy tales. But the edges were shifting. The foundation was new. She hired a lawyer, someone Rachel recommended, a partner at a family law firm in Stamford, to audit every shared financial account. The discovery was immediate. Derek had opened a joint credit card in both their names without Brooke's knowledge, $12,000 in charges, restaurants, clothing, a weekend trip to the Hamptons that Brooke had never been invited to. Brooke filed a dispute and a fraud report with the card issuer. The charges were reversed within 3 weeks. The account was closed, and Derek's name was flagged in the system. She sold the Tiffany ring, $14,000. She used the money to put a deposit on a one-bedroom apartment in Norwalk, her first place that wasn't chosen by Judith or furnished by Derek. Small, clean, a galley kitchen, a window that overlooked a courtyard with one stubborn oak tree. She started therapy. Twice a week at first, then once. The kind of quiet, difficult work that doesn't make for good storytelling, but makes for a better life. She called me on a Wednesday night, mid-October, her voice clearer than I'd heard it in years. "You were right about everything," she said, "and I was wrong about so many things, including you. You weren't wrong about wanting love, Brooke. You were wrong about who deserved your trust." A pause. "I have a photo of us on my bookshelf now, from when I was 6 and you were 11. We were at that lake house in Vermont." I remember. "It's the only photo in the apartment so far." My little sister sold a ring worth $14,000 and called it the best trade she'd ever made. I believed her. The email arrived on a Tuesday in November from a woman I'd never met. "Dear Fiona, my name is Sarah Donovan. I'm 28 years old, and I'm a single mother of a 3-year-old daughter. I'm writing because I saw the video from your sister's wedding. A friend shared a clip that one of the guests posted. I recognized Derek Mercer immediately." I read the rest standing at my kitchen counter, coffee going cold in my hand. Sarah had dated Derek 2 years before he met Brooke. Same playbook: charming entrance, rapid commitment, financial entanglement. He'd moved into her apartment within 4 months, run up $8,000 on her credit cards, and disappeared when she started asking questions about his income. "I blamed myself for 2 years," Sarah wrote. "I thought I was naive. I thought I was stupid. Then I watched your son stand up in front of 200 people and say what I'd been too afraid to say to anyone." She'd filed a complaint with Connecticut's Department of Consumer Protection, creating a paper trail that now included Derek's name, his pattern, and a documented history of financial misrepresentation across multiple relationships. I forwarded the email to Rachel, who CC'd the attorney handling Brooke's fraud case. That evening, I showed the email to Ethan. He read it at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd first told me about the messages on Derek's phone. "She said I helped her," he said quietly. "You did. I didn't even know she existed. That's usually how it works. You tell the truth for one person, and it reaches someone you never expected." He set down the phone and looked at me with an expression that was half 12-year-old and half something much older. "I just told the truth, Mom." "That's exactly the point, Ethan. That's exactly the point." 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, I sat across from a startup founder at a coffee shop in West Hartford and signed a branding contract worth more than any single project I'd done in a decade of freelancing. He'd been at the wedding. Table 9. He told me afterward that he didn't remember the cake, the flowers, or the venue. What he remembered was the woman who'd stood at the podium with a 12-page report and a steady voice and dismantled a con artist without raising it. "That's the kind of clarity I want in my brand," he said. I laughed, the first time the wedding had made me laugh, and signed the agreement. By December, my client list had grown by 3, all referrals from that night. My income was up 40%, and for the first time, the word stable applied to more than just my stubbornness. Ethan was thriving. He'd started a coding club at school and was building an app that tracked library book availability in real time, a project that made absolutely no commercial sense and made me prouder than anything I'd ever designed. Brooke and I met for dinner every Thursday. We were careful with each other, the way you are with something that broke and is being glued back together. We didn't pretend the last 10 years hadn't happened. We didn't fast forward to some false reconciliation. We just showed up every Thursday and tried to be honest. I spent 34 years believing I was the damaged one, the scratched label, The discount model. The wrong daughter at the wrong table. But the truth is, I was the only person in that family who wasn't for sale. And when the bill finally came due, I was the only one who could afford to pay it. Judith started therapy in November. Brooke's suggestion, my condition. She didn't transform overnight. I want to be clear about that, because this isn't one of those stories where the villain sees the light and everyone hugs and the credits roll. Judith was still Judith, still fussed over appearances, still said things that landed sideways, still arranged the diptyque candles before anyone came over. But small things changed. Quiet things. She posted a photo on Facebook in early December, both daughters, side by side, from a Thanksgiving dinner she'd actually invited me to. The caption read, "My daughters, both of them." 3 words. Unremarkable to anyone scrolling past. But I saw them, and I saved the screenshot, and I sat with it for a long time. She called me the week before Thanksgiving. Not with a command, with a question. "Would you and Ethan like to come for Thanksgiving? I'm making your recipe for the sweet potatoes, the one with the pecans." She remembered my recipe. In 34 years of Thanksgivings, she'd never once made anything of mine. "We'll be there," I said. And we were. The dinner was awkward in places. Judith corrected herself twice mid-sentence, old habits surfacing and being caught before they landed. Brooke shot me a look across the table each time, equal parts amusement and relief. After dinner, I walked through the hallway to the bathroom and stopped. On the shelf, the same shelf that had held nothing but Brooke's photos for as long as I could remember, there was a framed school portrait of Ethan, right next to Brooke's engagement photo, which Judith had quietly replaced with a candid of Brooke at her new apartment, smiling into a coffee mug. My mother didn't become a different person, but she stopped pretending I was invisible. And some days, that's enough. It was a Friday night in January, cold outside, warm in. Ethan and I were on the couch with a bowl of microwave popcorn between us, half watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures that he'd picked, and I'd pretended to understand. "Mom," he said, eyes still on the screen. "Do you ever wish I hadn't gone up to the mic?" I muted the television. "Every single day," I said. He turned to look at me, surprised. I could see him recalculating. This wasn't the answer he'd expected. "Because you shouldn't have had to, Ethan. A 12-year-old shouldn't have to protect his mother from her own family. That wasn't your job. It was never supposed to be your job." He was quiet for a moment. The deep-sea creatures drifted silently across the screen. "But I'm proud of you," I said. "Not because you exposed Derek. Because you stood up for what was right when every adult in that room chose comfort over truth." He picked at the edge of the popcorn bowl. "I didn't do it for the truth, Mom." "Then why?" He looked at me the way he sometimes did, direct, unblinking, that 12-year-old gravity that startled people who expected a kid. "Because nobody gets to talk about you like that. Not ever." I pulled him close. He let me hold him for a full 10 seconds before squirming away, which, for a 12-year-old boy, was the equivalent of a standing ovation. We sat there in the quiet. The fairy lights he'd strung along the bookshelf last Christmas glowed amber against the wall. My artwork, the pieces I'd designed, the ones I was proud of, hung in frames I'd chosen. 2 mugs of cocoa cooled on the coffee table. Nothing in this apartment was luxury, but everything in it was ours. Every square foot, every choice, every lamp, every mug, every truth. If you've made it this far, if you've been listening, really listening, then maybe you see yourself in this story somewhere. Maybe you're the one who sits at table 12, the one whose family makes you feel like a scratched label, the one who's been told over and over by the people who should love you most that you're not enough, not successful enough, not pretty enough, not married enough, not enough. I want you to hear this. Your worth is not determined by the person sitting next to you or by the person who isn't. It is not measured by a job title, a ring, or a zip code. And the loudest people in the room, the ones who laugh the hardest, who point the fastest, who rank everyone on a scale they invented. They are almost never the ones who matter. Sometimes the person who sees you most clearly is the smallest person in the room. Sometimes it's a 12-year-old boy in a Macy's suit with a phone full of screenshots and a heart full of something most adults have forgotten the name of. They called me a pathetic single mom. My mother called me a discount model with a scratched label. 200 people laughed. And my son walked through every single one of them to say what needed to be said. My name is Fiona Henderson. I'm 34. I'm a graphic designer, a mother, and the proudest person who ever sat at table 12. Table 12, the table for people they wished hadn't come. Turns out, it had the best view in the house. That's my story. And if it resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Now I have a question. What would you name this chapter of my life? Type A, the wedding that never was. Type B, table 12. Type C, the scratched label. Drop your answer in the comments, and if you want more stories like this, check the description below. I've linked a few that I think you'll love. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, your label doesn't define you, your choices do.